Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 11 of the anime series Kantai Collection, KanColle. And this was another really enjoyable episode for me, I gotta say. It had some really highly intriguing components to it. But it wasn't necessarily a pitch-perfect episode for me because there were some comedic elements that I just didn't feel really meshed well with the overall sort of building up to this really ominous Operation MI and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you had some comedic scenes between Oichi and Kitakami. They're going to be split up, and she's all paranoid that Nagato's trying to get in on that. Just kind of, it was funny, but, by itself, but it didn't quite mesh well with the overall themes of the episode, as well as there was, a sequence with the girls in sort of the cafeteria, and they're talking about drinking the milk and everything. And I mean, these elements are humanizing in the build-up to this impending onslaught. But I don't necessarily know. I question whether they actually worked out well, those scenes, in the overall aesthetic of this particular episode, building up to that onslaught. And but the most compelling things begin in the pre-credits sequence with Akagi having this premonition nightmare of her own demise in this oncoming battle. And, I mean, you basically see her sort of desperately trying to escape an abyssal onslaught, and she's carrying a wounded Kaga under her arm and all this kind of stuff. And she wakes up right at the point when she would basically be destroyed by missile fire, that kind of situation. And it's interesting to me because this is a theme that carries all throughout the episode. She's so moved by these dreams, we hear that, they are recurring, that she goes to Nagato, who has, put this whole mission into action in the absence of the Admiralty and everything like that, because she wants to figure out what the sort of placement of the Fleet Girls is going to be, what the, roster is going to be in this attack, and she's trying to challenge fate. She, there basically is this question she asks aloud: can I change fate? Can we change fate? And I find that highly intriguing and compelling. That's something I've gone back, over the entire course of the series from the beginning. As I've been learning about the game and as I've been speculating with you guys in comment conversations, and just how much of this series is based on real-world history. That seems like that is something called into question by Akagi as well as Nagato in this episode. Are we destined to basically circle the drain and just relive historical events? That, to me, is uber compelling. That's like a question that's a long time coming in this series, to hear characters finally acknowledging that and seeing Akagi being somewhat center stage as opposed to Fubuki. Really cool, because, I mean, she has been a thorough line throughout the series. It's not like, oh, we were suddenly introduced to her and now we're suddenly focusing on her. No, she's been there all the while, and she's had her little spotlight moments enough to really feel for what she's going through, this tension in her mind. And, again, going to Nagato and trying to change up the roster, trying to challenge what fate might have placed for them, ahead of them, It's interesting to me. You also have Nagato sort of mulling over this after the fact, being very much moved by her sort of metaphor about, being stuck in the egg yolk or whatever it is, because you have Nagato basically asking the question, what are we all here for? Why do we exist? And at that moment, I was like, facepalm, that's exactly one of the things I wish we would have learned in this series. But coming from that perspective of it's the elders who seem to hold the most power, they're the most effective in battle and all this stuff. They are also the ones through sort of, it's a great allegory for real life. The older you are, the more you've experienced, the more you learn to sort of watch yourself and watch your steps and that kind of thing. So it could be that these girls who are slightly older than the younger Fleet Girls, like Fubuki, and even younger than that, they have a sense that things could play out badly. And of course, that's the overriding sort of theme in the entirety of the episode. As the mission finally commences, they were pulling out all the stops with all of the girls that they were sending. There were some that I wasn't even familiar with that have had passing references and probably no references at all through the course of the series that if I was a game player of this game, I probably would be more familiar with. But I mean, you have Yudachi in there, you have Fubuki in there, you have, Kongo. Yamato is even being put into action Although, you know, we don't see that actually happen, and I don't know if that's a consequence of real-world history or not. You know, we basically see her being put to port, and she's all excited. But then you get to the point where, you know, Akagi's little group that she's leading with Fubuki as her escort, air quotes, they are waiting at a rendezvous point, and, you know, Yamato and her surrounding ships that she's supposed to be in tandem with, they're not there. There's no, you know, it's communication silence. They can't radio to them and figure out where they are, what's happened. They're just not there. And so Akagi, semi-pressured, you know, being feeled out about the situation that they're, you know, stuck in by Kaga, she basically decides, well, we gotta go ahead and go attack this abyssal stronghold. We'll leave Fubuki and Kongo behind. Little does she know, she's kind of walking head first right into her very premonition, you know, from that dream. And where it becomes highly intriguing once again, as they, you know, basically reveal to us, somebody in the comments of my previous video actually predicted that we would see this, you know, this new abyssal, you know, aircraft queen or whatever it is. I forget the exact title off the top of my head. But, in fact, you know, we do see the returning one-eyed woe, and we see a bunch of other abyssals, and then we see this new one, and they come under the attack of Akagi and her little group. They seem to make a really strong impact, and you're kind of thinking, wow, you know, maybe these fleet girls have their stuff together. Maybe they're going to pull out and pull through this particular battle. But of course, you see that the tide turns veritably quickly because of that one-eyed woe, sort of taking up the flank and everything like that, with a whole bunch of other abyssals. You have air-borne abyssals and everything focusing on Akagi and the girls, and we're seeing, like, you know, Kitakami just sort of having this revelation. It stunned me how this scene played out. She's just sort of like going to call to Oichi, who's not there, and she's like, oh, darn. And then she's apparently blown to smithereens. Like, one by one, these girls are getting picked off, and you see Akagi having this horror of recognition that no matter what I tried, I ended up creating the exact scenario from my premonition dream. And just as you have Udachi calling out Akagi, you know, look above you or whatever, and a missile is being shot, to kind of match her dream, because Kaga wasn't wounded in under her arm as she's trying to escape, as it was in the dream. But you basically have that last shot of, you know, Akagi's face in terror. And this coincides with Fubuki playing back on her mind a previous battle where she was really the strategist, and she really figured out it was a bait and switch. And she got there in the nick of time to help her fellow fleet girls. I have to wonder, as we fade out, cliffhanger for this episode, as the missile is impendingly, you know, pointed at Akagi, are we going to see Fubuki get there in the nick of time and change fate? Why was it so emphasized, brought into question in this episode, if not for the sake of making a change against, you know, predisposition of how this is all supposed to play out? Will we see Fubuki bite the big one in trying to save, you know, Akagi as her escort? Will we see them commanding the day? Will Akagi be sunk? You know, all of these things are called into question because of that predominant underlying question all throughout this episode. Can we challenge what is seemingly set in stone? You know, the future is unwritten. Even if for these girls they are reliving history, they're not the original ships. You know, they're the souls. They're carrying the souls of these vessels. What are they? Never got explained in the series, and I kind of wish they would have delved into the origins of both the Abyssals and the Fleet Girls and how they all came to be and all this kind of stuff, the fairies. But quite frankly, it's still uber compelling to me, the idea of, you know, we've all had this speculation going in from the beginning of the series as we're watching, you know, different Fleet Girls get taken out or, you know, upgrades and all this stuff. It does have a loose play on real-world history. And I begged the question all throughout this series, and I've always said, well, I don't think it's written in stone that they are, you know, aggressively, you know, nose to the grindstone, following step-by-step real-world history. Maybe they'll manipulate the story for the narrative, whatever narrative you can sort of, you know, scrape out of the bottom of the barrel in this particular series. As far as narrative elements go, the last like 3-4 episodes I feel have been really strong. Less aloof, more following a through-line story and, you know, the focus and everything. And it was nice to have another episode where Fubuki wasn't necessarily the main focus. You know, we saw her reacting to things, and we saw she was still a very active participant in the story. Yudachi, too, as well. I love my poi. And I love seeing Kongo and Yamato and stuff, even though Yamato is much more a brief sort of time on screen and that, you know, that kind of thing. But I like that Akagi, she's a character that I've been very intrigued by, and through Fubuki's fascination and just being enamored with and idolizing and everything, I found her to be a very intriguing character, and I found the dynamic between she and Kaga to be very interesting as well, especially learning from you guys in the comments that they are not actually sister ships, even though in the series they kind of sort of are, and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really make sense, but I like that the focus was on Akagi in this framework, and they had that really intriguing question, you know, playing into the viewer's question, at least if you're like me, what's going on? You know, are these girls destined for failure and destruction, or can they bend through the force of will and, you know, just their own skills? In Fubuki's case, you know, can they bend what they perceive to be fate, what is perceived to be locked in stone, and have a better sort of outcome by the end of the series? It remains to be seen. We have one episode to go, and I am primped on the edge of my seat to see who's going to live, who's going to die, if anyone's going to survive, and whether it's going to be a pseudo-happy ending with, you know, a few of the characters just thankful they made it out, you know, from this battle. Will they succeed in taking out the Abyssals? Who knows? Because it looks like they have a hell of a force on their hands as well, and yeah, so I mean, this episode was kind of up and down in elements, but the good outweighed the bad for me. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 11 of Kantai Collection KanColle, if you've seen it, and where you think we're going to go in the final episode. Is it going to be, you know, playing out good for these girls? Is it going to be playing out bad for these girls? Are Akagi and, you know, some of these more notable characters going to face their own demise? Do you speculate? And so yeah, otherwise that's pretty much it for me on this. I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.